Paul McKeskey, 11-year NBA veteran, calling into the show. All right, we're going to switch topics now. So a lot of my listeners are probably be very familiar with the guy that is joining us on the line right now. Many of you probably know him as the QAnon Shaman. His name is Jacob Chansley. Jacob was the first person indicted for the January 6th insurrection. He's owned what he did. He got out of jail. He did his time. And now he's running as a libertarian for the 8th Congressional District out of Arizona. So I appreciate Jake taking the time to join us. Jake, thanks so much for being here. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'd like to say for the record, nobody's been charged with insurrection. If you want to see an insurrection, look at what happened in Afghanistan during the Bosch withdrawal. That's an insurrection.
We can definitely talk about that. There were some people that were charged with sedition, and some people would characterize it as an insurrection. Some people wouldn't. We could definitely get to that. Let me start by asking you this. You've already answered the question of, do you regret what you did? Do you own what you did? I'm not going to ask that question all over again because you've already answered that, and I appreciate your answer. But let me ask you this. If someone asked you, why were you there to begin with, what would be your response to that?
I've answered that question a lot as well. Spiritual reasons, because Washington, D.C. is built on ley lines. Those are electromagnetic lines where pyramids, obelisks, ancient temples, medicine wheels are built. It's why we have an obelisk in D.C., the Capitol building, the White House, the Supreme Court, the Lincoln Memorial, Jefferson Memorial. They're all built on ley lines. Mm-hmm. If there's going to be 1 million people on the ley lines, then I'm going to be there as a shamanic practitioner to ensure that the highest possible frequencies of love, peace, and harmony are put into the grid. Also, because there has been a long string of abuses that this federal government has perpetrated on us Americans, and it stretches all the way back to 1913, the Federal Reserve. It stretches all the way back to things like allowing Pearl Harbor to happen, the assassination of JFK and the cover-up that ensued, the massive amounts of corruption and the moving of our public tax dollars into the private hands of oligarchs and to international corporations and banking cartels. Then there's things like, Waco, Texas, Oklahoma City, 9/11, the Vegas shooting, the 33,000 emails that were deleted and no prosecution, Benghazi, no prosecution, the WikiLeaks emails from John Podesta. Then there's also things like the Russia hoax for 4 years that they never, retracted. It was now clearly known to be a hoax and all generated by the Clinton.
Let's go one at a time. Let's go one at a time. And this is the beauty, right, Jake, of doing an interview like this, instead of doing like a 5-minute TV interview. We have time to talk about these issues. Okay, so you mentioned a lot. Let's start with the Vegas shooting. And then we'll get back to January 6th. And then I want to talk about your candidacy because you're running for office. What about the Vegas shooting that you think, did or didn't happen? Because my understanding is that there was one person responsible for that, and that was the shooter who took his own life.
Yeah, that's the narrative that they say. But when you talk to people that were on the ground, that's not the story. And a lot of those people that came out and started talking about what actually happened and what they saw and what they experienced ended up dead. So it's kind of funny how that happens and how it's happened over and over again, especially with people like Gary Webb, who blew the whistle on the CIA trafficking tons of cocaine into the country, or, people like Bill Cooper, or, even people like Martin Luther King Jr. that stand up and speak truth to power. All of them end up dead somehow for some reason. So,
that's because a madman, a racist madman decided to assassinate Martin Luther King. I don't think that had anything to do with the government in that situation. But let's go back to, let me start by saying this. I agree with a lot of your platform, right? You've talked about this, and I did a lot of research on you as a libertarian. You want term limits. I'm with you 100% on that. You want single bill voting. I'm with you 100% on that. And a lot of the things you've talked about, where I hesitate and I'm like, okay, that's different, or I could use other terms, is when you talk about, say, the Vegas shooting. It's been investigated. One person was responsible. There's no evidence that anybody else was responsible for it. Now, you might find a few people that disagreed with it, but there's no evidence to support the fact that there was a second shooter or the FBI was involved. And when I think some people would label that as a conspiracy theory. I know you're a smart guy. You're well-spoken, and I agree with you on a lot of issues. But when you say, the Vegas shooting and some of these other things, I become hesitant. Where am I wrong?
Well, do you trust the government?
Do I always trust the government? No, but that doesn't mean I think the October 1 shooting was the government's fault. It was a crazy lunatic who lived 45 minutes from Vegas, who bought a bunch of guns. It's been proven that he was trying to come up with other areas of killing a bunch of innocent people. He shot himself in that room, and there's no evidence to support the fact that anybody else was involved besides him. That's why yeah, go ahead.
Well, hold on. Let me ask you this. Do you think that somehow miraculously one of the terrorists from 9/11, that their passport miraculously survived the tragic events of that day and just so happened to find its way onto the ground?
Okay, so that's a different topic. If you want to talk,
No, I'm just but the point I'm getting at, dude, and we can derail on this if you want, but I don't trust the government. I've seen cover up after 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 cover up. And if you look into Operation Northwoods, which Kennedy said no to, okay, which is where the CIA wanted to target hotels in Florida and do a terrorist attack and blame Cuba so they could have an excuse to go and invade Cuba. If you look at that and you realize that there's a track record of government abuses, this goes back to my reasons for going not just on January 6th, but also on December 12th, when everything was actually peaceful. I expected more of the same on January 6th. Then you'll see why it is. And I didn't even get a chance to start delineating things like, like I said, the Russia hoax for 4 years, they knew was a lie. Then there's the COVID lockdown.
When you say Russia, okay, let's go to the Russia hoax. Do you not believe that Russia interfered in our 2016 elections? Because I'm trying to understand what you mean by Russia hoax.
Okay, if Russia wanted somebody to be president, they would have picked Hillary Clinton because of Uranium One and the fact that she was more than willing to cooperate with Russia and send Russia our nutrients, our minerals at a discount. The notion that Russia, it was interfering in any way, shape, or form, more so than the Chinese, which the Chinese are more likely to interfere in our elections than Russia. We get 25,000 cyber attacks from China and the Chinese Communist Party a day.
You find it ironic that Donald Trump has never said anything negative about Vladimir Putin. In fact, he stood on a stage right next to Vladimir Putin and said he believed Putin over our own CIA and FBI. You don't find that a little interesting that Trump to this day has never said one thing negative about Vladimir Putin? I'm not a huge Joe Biden fan, but at least he called him an evil, murderous dictator, which is what Vladimir Putin is. I think we both could agree on that. You don't find that ironic?
Well, no, actually, I think it's rather interesting because there's some things that Putin has said and done, like kicking Monsanto out of his country, for example, that I actually agree with. I think we should have kicked Monsanto out of this country a long freaking time ago. But they line the, bureaucrats and the DC puppets with lots of money through lobbying. That's why they get liability shields for their toxins. That's why they weren't prosecuted for things like Agent Orange or, any of the many other, ecocides and cancers and stuff they've caused. So, we live in a corrupt system in this country, and that's what my platform is designed to dismantle. Because those four things that you forgot to mention, 7-figure fines, expulsion, and prosecution for insider trading,
which I also agree with you on. So let me try to define this here. We agree. I don't always believe our government. Do I believe there's a lot of corruption in DC? Absolutely. I'm with you 100% on that. But I think there's a fine line between saying that and saying 9/11 was an inside job. Or the October. I know a lot about the October 1 shooting, brother. And I'm telling you, Jake, right now, you can believe what you want to believe, but one man was responsible for killing all those people. The evidence is overwhelming. And I think when you make a claim like that, you have to have evidence to back it up. Not just a couple people said blah, 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 blah. But let's
hold on a second. I'm not making claims of anything. What I'm saying is there are way too many unanswered questions, and there is way too many patterns of cover-ups taking place by the government when they orchestrate things and then they go awry. So I don't trust people. I don't trust institutions. I trust patterns. And the patterns that I've seen throughout the last several decades is that the American people have become a target for intel agencies. They've become a target for investigative agencies like the FBI. And anytime their power or their supremacy is in any way, shape, or form challenged or threatened, they have no problem killing people.
Well, let's talk about for example, the 2020 elections? Because is it fair to characterize you? I know you're running as a libertarian. If it was Donald Trump versus Joe Biden, is it fair to assume that you would vote for Donald Trump if the elections were tomorrow?
Well, I can't vote, but yeah, absolutely. You think I'm going to vote for Joe Biden?
Well,
look at the country, dude. Look at the country.
Okay, well,
look at the state of the world. You think that would happen under Trump?
All right, well, let's talk about that, Jake. I would say if not for Donald Trump, you would have never gone to jail. You wouldn't have been there on January 6th. I would say if not for Donald Trump, a lot of lives would have been saved with the coronavirus, with which we can, by the way, I'm happy to talk about that with you. So there are positives and negatives to every presidency. And I'll be the first one to say I voted for Joe Biden in 2020, not because I'm a Democrat, because it was an anti-Donald Trump vote. He's also facing 91 felonies. Do you believe Joe Biden won the 2020 election free and fair? I'm not asking you if there was. Go ahead.
No, I do not. Look into Mark Elias and the way that he went into swing states and changed the election laws in courts. Look into the Zucker boxes. Look into the ballot harvesting, the mail-in voting. Look into the way absentee ballots were a factor. Look into the way that the voting machines could be hacked by the Ericsson Corporation out of Sweden and how they control our whole global
Jake,
infrastructure.
Why didn't Donald Trump's own attorneys present any evidence in a courtroom?
Well, because all of his cases were civil cases and they were not seen in court. I'm curious to see what happens in Georgia, considering it's a federal case and he now has subpoena power and he can end up bringing forward all of the evidence.
If you don't trust the 2020 election, then why are you running for office if you don't trust our process?
Because I'm of the belief that we as American people, if we all become active, if we all vote, then we can do something like turn the tide in an election. And it is my contention that the people here in the 8th District of Arizona want very real change. And I think that they believe at this point, they're not going to find it in any Republican or Democrat candidate, establishment or MAGA.
They didn't want it with Kari Lake. They didn't want it with Kari Lake, who also echoed what you echoed, that the 2020 election was stolen. With all due respect, I completely disagree with you. That's like saying the earth is flat, in my opinion. Kari Lake is the one that said over and over again that Trump won, Trump won. And guess what? The good people of Arizona did not vote her in. So listen, if you think that Trump won, that's one thing. I haven't seen all those things that you listed are like Dinesh D'Souza stuff. The bottom line is we had Republican judges appointed by Donald Trump. We had, secretaries of state, Republicans, and there has been zero evidence of widespread voter fraud that could have changed the outcome of the election. And I'm being honest with you, Jake, because I think you're a smart guy. You're well-spoken. I agree with you on a lot of issues. But when you start talking about Trump won, it's where I become hesitant, because yes, I do believe that's a conspiracy theory because there's no evidence to prove that Trump won the election. There's just no widespread voter fraud out there.
So let's talk for a second about this term conspiracy theory.
Okay.
That was actually a term that came out shortly after JFK was assassinated, when lots of people in the country did not believe that Lee Harvey Oswald was the lone gunman in the JFK assassination.
Just because JFK might have been killed by our own CIA doesn't mean that Donald Trump won the 2020 election.
Okay, so you're telling me that JFK being killed by our own CIA is somehow not cause for concern? You don't think that those powers that had a sitting president assassinated?
I didn't say it wasn't cause from concern. I didn't say that.
Just hold on.
Go ahead.
Let's talk about. I want to quote JFK for you real quick, okay?
Okay, but what does that have to do with the 2020 elections?
I'll tell you. I will tell you. Just listen, okay? JFK said in a speech, "We are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasions, on subversions instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conspired vast human and material resources to create a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, scientific, economic, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No rumor is printed, no expenditure is questioned, and no secret is revealed. What JFK was talking about when he talked about this tightly knit, highly efficient machine, the machine that I believe had him assassinated in broad daylight on live television in front of the entire country and then brushed it under the rug, that tightly knit, highly efficient machine is the same military industrial complex that Eisenhower warned us about. It is currently what we call the deep state. It is called the swamp in other places, or the shadow government by other people.
What is the deep state?
Okay, so the deep state is actually a number of things. Number one, it is the corruption of the key checks and balances portions of our government, so that the checks and balances portions of the government can be corrupted and therefore circumvented, so that power can be centralized within the electoral bodies of our.
Let me ask you about that.
Just hold on, dude. You asked what the deep state was. Do you want to hear the answer or no?
Well,
because this is really important. Telling people what the deep state is very important, because we can't just call it the boogeyman, because that's essentially what a lot of these candidates are doing. We have to articulate what it is. So it is these key checks and balances portions within the government that have been corrupted, so they can be circumvented and power can be centralized within the electoral portions of our government. And it is those same corrupting entities that have corrupted the over 500 bureaucratic agencies that are in charge with, quote unquote, regulating commerce. Now, these bureaucratic agencies are writing regulations, which is a form of law, what we can buy, what we can sell, what is legal, what is illegal. They also have their own enforcement agents for these regulations. So they have legislative writing law. They have executive enforcing their regulations, enforcing their law. And they also have their own administrative courts, which are outside the federal court system. And that is actually the founding fathers' definition of tyranny, when you consolidate all three branches of government into a centralized power. Okay, so when you have these corrupting agencies or corrupted agencies along with the corrupted officials in the government, right? And these two entities are working together along with the international corporations or banking cartels that seek to monopolize our currency, resources, and labor. Now you're beginning to see how the deep state is formed and how it has exponentially grown for decades since Kennedy was talking about the tightly knit, highly efficient machine, since Eisenhower warned us about the military industrial complex.
Okay, let me jump in here and let me ask you this. I hear a lot of people on the right use the term deep state. I understand that you're not a Republican. I get that. But would you admit that if there is a deep state out there, it's not just Democrats, it's both sides, Republicans and Democrats? Would you be willing to
Absolutely. Absolutely. The uniparty in DC is a very big problem.
Okay, so I think that's important. Even though we might disagree on some things, I think it's important to note that if you think there is corruption, which I believe there is, or you think there is a deep state, that it could happen on either side of the aisle. I think that is important to be at least fair on that. So let's go back to the 2020 election, if I may. Does January 6th happen if Donald Trump doesn't say months before, I won the election in a landslide, Joe Biden cheated and the Democrats cheated? Would you have been there on January 6th? And does January 6th happen if Donald Trump doesn't say those things?
I'll say this. January 6th was a setup on behalf of the deep state. It was a setup because, and if you want, I can explain.
It was a setup. You were there.
I'll explain. Okay. So Chief Sund, the former Capitol Police chief of the Capitol Police, he had certain emergency powers where he could invoke the National Guard at will that were stripped from him shortly before January 6th by Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell and the Congress. Okay. They made it to where he had to go through them to invoke the National Guard. Now, all of that being said, when he asked for the National Guard, when he submitted the paperwork, he was told no, because it would be, quote unquote, bad.
I know. I read that testimony. I understand. I read that testimony. I know. Hold on, but this is important. I know exactly what you're saying. That doesn't mean that the over 1,000 people that were convicted were set up. Nobody forced you to go into that building. Nobody forced them to beat. I know you didn't, but people beat police officers, Jake, that day. They defecated on Nancy Pelosi's desk. They were chanting, hang Mike Pence. Those people weren't set up. They're idiots. Those people are idiots that were doing those things. They're criminals. There's a reason why you're not behind bars right now, because good behavior, right? You didn't attack any police officers. You didn't steal anything. But will you at least agree with me that those people were violent, that attacked police officers, and they deserve to be behind bars, and they weren't set up? They're bad people.
Anybody that attacks police officers or vandalizes property deserves to be prosecuted for their actions. However, one thing I want you to note, and this is actually something that has come out very recently, okay, is that The FBI infiltrated many of the patriotic communities online and on the ground, and at this point, all of the rhetoric regarding violence and the calls for violence on the day of January 6th, there's over 200 either confidential federal informants or agents that were fomenting the violence and actually participating in pushing people to be violent or being violent themselves with no prosecution. So
wait, hold on. Let's backtrack. Who pushed people like you to be violent? I know that you were not violent, but I'm just using it as an example.
So then why is that directed at me? And I just told you it was federal agents, and that this is part of the reason why.
Did anybody push you to be violent that day? Did anybody tell you to be violent?
This is why I'm saying that it was a setup, and you haven't allowed me to delineate further. It's not just what Chief Son said, okay? There's also the fact that Yogananda Pittman, the Capitol Police intelligence officer, did not get this information to Chief Son that she got from the FBI and that she got from the Pentagon, which this is all according to Capitol Police Lieutenant Tarek Johnson, who's been blowing the whistle about this for a while. But the Mockingbird Media does not want to interview him about these things.
I'll interview anybody. I'll interview anybody. I'm interviewing you. I'll interview anybody. So I'm certainly not a part of the Mockingbird Media, as you would call it. I want the truth. My understanding is over 1,000 people were already convicted, you being one of them. And let's just say, hypothetically speaking, that you're 100% right, that people were, as you use the term, pushed to or coerced into doing things. Guess what? We're all adults. You made the decision to go in there. They made the decision to go in there. I don't care, quite frankly, if somebody said, hey, you should do this or you should do that. I noticed something you haven't brought up. You brought up Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell. You haven't brought up Donald Trump, who sat on his ass in the White House for 5 hours and did absolutely nothing while a woman was killed and officers were beaten. Why don't you put any of that criticism and responsibility towards Donald Trump?
Well, I've said this on several occasions, and you probably missed it. And that is that if I were Donald Trump, the first thing I would have said the moment that I took the stage at the Ellipse was, when we go down to the Capitol today, do not break any laws, do not cross the barriers, do not touch any police officers. You must keep it 100% peaceful and within the law.
I agree. I agree. So, Jake, with that being said, do you think Donald Trump should be held partially responsible for what took place that day?
No, I do not, because he is not in control of anybody else's actions other than his own. And if it's true that it was a setup, and I do believe that it was a setup, most certainly, then it seems to me that the setup and the psyop that include that was afterward, that was in response to the setup, those things are psychological warfare 101, dude. These are the things that the deep state has been doing for a long time.
These people that you're claiming set it up, are they Democrats? Are they Joe Biden supporters? Who are these people?
Oh, I think they are uniparty. I think they are the intelligence community. I think that they are the investigative agencies like the FBI, the CIA.
Why would they want this to happen? Why would they want
the Pentagon? What's that?
Why would they want this to happen? Why would they allegedly set this up? Why would they want an insurrection? Yes, I do believe it was an insurrection. Why would they want this to happen?
Well, you see, it's all about political optics. They could use this to not just go after Donald Trump and not just impeach him a second time, but then, take him to court under things like seditious conspiracy and the setup itself. I mean, like the fact that Enrique Tarrio was offered a plea deal where he just lied on the stand and said that he had a third party between him and Trump that were organizing January 6th, and they would let him go free after a couple months. The fact that he said no to that and blew the whistle on that, okay, that right there is evidence of corruption. The fact they were going after Trump, but it's also about going after his supporters. Hold on. Yeah. It's also about going after his supporters, creating the optics in the country that Trump supporters are somehow a danger to our country, and then weaponizing the government to go after them in each of these FBI field offices over the country. I mean, Stephen Friend, the FBI whistleblower, talked about how the FBI is being weaponized against American citizens. He talked about how these people are basically being labeled as domestic terrorists. There's literally no more U.S. Marshals on airplanes anymore because they're following anyone and everyone that went and flew into D.C. in early January of 2021. Even if they didn't even go to the J6 rally, the air marshals are not keeping Americans safe because they're going after the political opponents of this administration.
Let's talk talk about that, the domestic terrorism. I don't know of any court in this country that has labeled anybody on January 6th as a domestic terrorist. But I will say this: if you and I'm not putting you in this category, but there were people there. I think the majority of the people there that went into the Capitol were very ignorant people, very stupid people that did some very stupid things. They did some violent things, some of them. They stole some things. They destroyed property. And yes, I think the overwhelming majority of them were MAGA Donald Trump supporters, and that was proven in a court of law. I don't think this was Antifa. I don't think this was a setup. I think this was overwhelmingly a lot of stupid people that day that did a lot of dumb things, hang Mike Pence, and they wanted to overturn the outcome of an election that to this day, you still say Donald Trump won, which I think is absurd because there's no actual, real, overwhelming evidence to prove something like that. I appreciate the fact that you've owned what you did. I give you credit for that. I always have. You did your time and you got out and you said, listen, I did what I did. I own it. I appreciate that about you. But let's be honest here. A lot of dumb people did a lot of stupid things that day. Why can't we just characterize it as that instead of saying they were pushed to do things by Nancy Pelosi or infiltrated by the FBI? Dumb people did stupid things that day. How could you disagree with that?
Well, I've said before, anybody that vandalized property, assaulted police officers deserves to be prosecuted. And that would also include all of the people that were rioting all over the United States of America, burning down businesses.
BLM has nothing to do with January 6th.
No. Hold on. What we're talking about here is my standards for justice. If you assault police officers, if you vandalize property.
I agree.
Okay. So hold on. Then why is it that 90 to 95% of the federal charges against those rioters in 2020 have been dropped?
Can you name me one name of one person that assaulted a police officer during the BLM riots that was not prosecuted?
Yeah, dude, you can look it up. Kamala Harris was bailing him out of jail, dude.
Not true. Not true.
Bro.
What you just said is not true. And I asked, let's go back to what
you
just said.
My gosh.
Hold on. Kamala Harris wanted to make sure that people that were arrested got legal representation. That's number one. And number two, I asked you to name, because you made a very serious charge there, and you made it seem like people that attacked and hurt police officers weren't prosecuted. I'm asking you to name me one name of one actual individual during the BLM protest, clear-cut evidence, assaulted a police officer, and was not charged with a crime. Can you please name me one name?
Look into the indictments that were dropped. 90 to 95% of the charges were dropped. Look, dude, I'm not going to give you a name because it's irrelevant.
It's actually irrelevant. Very relevant. You're claiming that people
it's irrelevant,
assaulted police officers. Okay, well, let me give you the big difference
because
here.
The Mockingbird Media said that it was mostly peaceful as a building burned behind them, as people in CHOP or Chaz were literally being raped and murdered. Okay, and they called it the Summer of Love. Dude, they literally occupied a federal court building in Colorado.
What member of the media
they
called
tried
it
to set a
building?
They tried to set a police precinct on fire in Portland,
Jake,
with police officers inside.
Jake.
So hold on a second, dude. So look. What we're talking about here, once again, is optics, bro. What we're talking about is optics.
Yeah.
And the optics were made to look in a certain way by the Mockingbird Media, and they were made to look a certain way about January 6th by the Mockingbird Media. They used my image, in part with the images of violence outside the building, to create a shock and awe campaign. And then they used that shock and awe campaign to divide the country based on dueling sides of propaganda around an event that has a very gray area. It's not black and white. Now, do I think that the right wing of the Mockingbird Media and the left wing of the Mockingbird Media are inaccurate in their portrayals of January 6th? Yes, I do. Absolutely. It's designed to divide us. Okay, it's a gray issue.
You don't think Donald Trump tried to divide us? You don't put any.
No, I think the Mockingbird Media did. Dude, look, I've been to enough Trump rallies to see that there's black, white, there's Hispanic, there's Asian, there's young, there's old.
Donald Trump got under 50% of the black vote. So let's not try to preach that all these black
people and look at the hood now. Look at them supporting Donald Trump now. Okay, we've got a lot of people, even in Brooklyn, bro. I'll make you a bet in the 2024 election that there's no way he gets 25% of the black vote. Now, you'll probably say that was election fraud, and you'll say the election was stolen. But let me ask you another question. Why is it before 2016,
months before the election with Hillary Clinton. Donald Trump said the election was going to be stolen and it was going to be fraudulent and Democrats were going to steal the election and Hillary was going to steal it. Then all of a sudden, Donald Trump won. And all of a sudden, I didn't hear anything from Donald Trump or right-wing Republicans out there, even people like you, saying that the election in 2016 was stolen. Why is that? For the next 3 years, I didn't hear anything about election integrity, and Hillary Clinton conceded the next day. Is it only when Donald Trump wins the election's fair, but when he loses, it's a lie?
Maybe it's because the Democrats were the ones screaming about the voting machines and election fraud and Russian
weren't. Hillary conceded the next day.
Yes, they were, dude. Yes, they were. Well, come on, bro. Like, you can't
what prominent Democrat, and by the way, there wasn't an insurrection. Democrats didn't cause an insurrection. But what prominent Democrat can you name?
They just rioted all over the country. That's what they did.
They did? Really?
Uh-huh.
But didn't Hillary concede?
Look into it, bud. Look into it.
Didn't Hillary concede the next day? Did she not?
Well, if you consider saying that the election was stolen from her over and over and over and over again, concession, then I guess so.
She never said the election was stolen. She called Donald Trump an illegitimate president. I think when you say that, up to POWs, John McCain, I don't respect him because he was captured. In my opinion, that makes you illegitimate. But you know what? Donald Trump won the 2016 election. He won it fair and square. Never once have I ever said the election was stolen. But then he wins. And all those comments go away. Oh, I guess this was a fair election. But when Donald Trump loses, then the Democrats must have cheated. That's the point I'm trying to make, Jake.
So you believe that Biden got 81 million votes?
You know why I believe that? I'll tell you why. Because of people like me. I'm a registered independent. I voted for Joe Biden, not because I'm a Joe Biden supporter, because I'm anti-Donald Trump. It was an anti-Donald Trump vote. So the answer is absolutely 100% yes. And if Donald Trump stayed off of Twitter and he stopped being such an a-hole and attacking every single person that disagrees with him, didn't say that COVID was going to be 15 cases down to 0, and take his COVID campaign, turning it into campaign rallies. If he didn't do all those things, he would still be president of the United States. Donald Trump did this to himself, Jake.
Okay.
You disagree? Tell me why you disagree with me. Why did he lose?
I don't think he lost, bro.
Well, that's clear, but I mean, you can say that, but Kyrie Irving also says the earth is flat. It doesn't mean you're right. This is what's frustrating.
Well, see, now what you're trying to do is you're trying to correlate these two ideas.
Yes, I am.
And I don't agree with that correlation.
I think they're both conspiracy theories. You have to have actual real evidence.
Conspiracy theories.
Well, in a courtroom, Donald Trump's own attorneys had the opportunity to show evidence. They couldn't do it. Carrie Lake said that the election was stolen from her. She had the opportunity, her attorneys, to prove it in court. She couldn't do it. Your attorneys, even though I know you disagree with the attorneys that represented you, and I feel bad for you when it comes to that, by the way, but they couldn't prove that you were innocent. It's why you went to jail. I'm not saying every case is full-blown, innocent people don't get thrown in jail, because sometimes they do, and it's terrible. But we have our day in court. Donald Trump will have his day in court facing his 91 felonies, which I would also assume you probably think he's innocent, right?
The DOJ and the FBI have been weaponized against the American people for decades.
Okay, so does that mean every case, every person is innocent and nobody commits any crimes and Donald Trump can do no wrong? Is that
no, that's not what that means at all.
So what does it mean? That Donald Trump is innocent and that's why you think he's innocent, because the DOJ, by the way, Jack Smith's also prosecuted Democrats. Were you aware of that? He prosecuted John Edwards. I don't know if you were aware of that. So do you think this is the deep state going after Donald Trump as well?
What I think is that the deep state, these weaponized agencies, they practice something called prosecutorial discretion or investigative discretion, where the people, whether they be U.S. attorneys or people that are like high-level agents within these agencies, choose to prosecute or not prosecute, choose to investigate or not investigate crimes and file charges. And the fact of the matter is, there is numerous cases of this happening. A great example would be Jeffrey Epstein. The feds knew what he was doing, and guess what? They were in league with him. Mossad and CIA were like this with Jeffrey Epstein, okay? They knew what was going on, and they didn't do anything about it, okay? And that's not the only case. There's the Barney Frank scandal. There's the Franklin cover-up and what happened in Nebraska with Lawrence King. There's also the case with Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino on the military bases. There's
Okay, let's
also
talk about that.
There's also, hold on, there's also the CIA, the Pentagon, and the FBI all having child porn either on their own servers or on the servers of their employees. And this scandal came out a long time ago. Now, let's also talk about the $2.3 trillion that went missing from the Pentagon's
before we
defense
get to that,
budget
hold on,
on 9/10. No, dude. Hold on. The reason why I'm delineating these things, bro, is because there is a pattern, and I don't trust people. I don't trust institutions. I trust patterns, bro. And there's a very clear pattern of corruption and malfeasance for which the government is investigating itself.
This is where we fundamentally. This is where
Operation Fast and Furious, dude. They were literally trying. They gave guns to the cartels.
This is where
the Obama administration. Then they lied about it.
This is where we agree on some things and then we fundamentally disagree. Just because you don't trust the government doesn't mean that Donald Trump is innocent. Just because you don't trust the government doesn't mean that Hillary Clinton is holding a prostitution ring at Pizzagate in a pizza restaurant, Jake. You believe in Pizzagate,
I never said that. You're trying to project now. What
you're claiming that Donald Trump is innocent and you're going by, I don't trust the government. Here's why I don't trust the government. There's a pattern, so Donald Trump must be innocent. Would you say the same thing about Hunter Biden and the Biden family, as some people like to characterize them, the Biden crime family? Hunter Biden has been indicted now for a second time. Would you defend Hunter Biden with, your thoughts on the DOJ and how it's being weaponized as you do with Donald Trump?
What's the charges against Hunter Biden, bro?
He's got gun charges now for a second time. We have Republicans that are claiming the Biden crime family when there's no evidence that Joe Biden committed any crime. This is now the second time that Hunter Biden has been indicted, by the way, with an unloaded gun that was unused and he had for 11 days that he didn't commit a crime with. To people like you or me, it would have been thrown out by now. But my question to you is, when a Democrat...
hold on, dude. I've talked to people in prison that are felons that there was a gun just even in the car registered to somebody else. It was not even in their possession, and they got 10 years, dude. They got 10 years.
So I can't speak to that.
Biden, hold on. Hunter Biden has photographs of himself, not just weighing crack cocaine, but hanging out with hookers, many of which look underage, and he has a firearm in his hand. So you're telling me that, and you're telling me that he shouldn't get the same equal treatment that so many people in the federal system should get?
I'll answer that.
10 years, bro. 5-year minimum.
I'll answer that.
5-year minimum.
First of all, I have no idea what case you're talking about and someone you spoke to prison with, and we have no idea whether they're telling the truth or not. That's number one. Number two, just because the way the laws work in this country, just because you think somebody looks underage doesn't mean they're underage. That's number two. Number three, if you look at the actual case of Hunter Biden, by the way, Hunter Biden's never been a felon before. I wanted to make that clear. An unloaded gun that he had illegally for, I think it was either 11 days or 14 days. And if you ask to non-biased political people, they would tell you no person would ever go to jail for that, especially for a first-time offense. So no, I disagree with you on that, but I do find it interesting that when it comes to Donald Trump, he could do no wrong in your eyes, and he's innocent of these 91 felony counts, which I believe are very serious. But then when it comes to a Democrat or Hunter Biden, you don't want to attack the DOJ. Why is it that when a Republican is indicted for a crime, you immediately want to talk about how you don't trust the government and the DOJ, but when a Democrat is indicted, he must have committed the crime or he's not being punished hard enough? Why is that, Jake?
Well, clearly you haven't done your homework, because
I've done plenty of homework.
No, I just named Lawrence King. He's an up-and-coming Republican star, and the DOJ covered up his crimes. I'm saying that's atrocious and awful. Then there's also things like, Dennis Hastert, the former Speaker of the House and in the Bush years, and the fact that Sibel Edmonds blew the whistle about the fact that he had things like child pornography on his computer and that he was trafficking guns and drugs in Turkey. And then the FBI took that dossier and said, forget about it. Don't just forget about it.
If somebody committed any crime like that, I agree with you. I want them to the highest extent of the law. Do you think Matt Gaetz is a pedophile?
I don't know.
You don't know. Okay.
I will say this about Matt Gaetz. Just hear me out on this.
Okay.
I will say this about Matt Gaetz. Shortly after I did my Newsmax interview a couple
Yeah.
of weeks ago, I think it was the 13th of November.
Yep.
Shortly after that, Matt Gaetz came out and started talking about single bill voting, and then he proposed a anti-corruption plan that was essentially my campaign platform, talking about term limits, talking about getting rid of lobbying, and talking about insider trading, and touting it as his own idea. So
Again,
what I think, what I think about everybody in the dinosaur circus, that's what I call DC, because they're all a bunch of dinosaurs and it's a clown show. It's
I don't disagree. I don't disagree with you there.
Okay. What I think of most of the people in the dinosaur circus is that most of them are corrupt and beholden to NGOs, special interest groups, international corporations, and international banking cartels. They don't represent the American people. Not at all. That's why I'm running for Congress.
Okay, but everything you just mentioned is the Trump family and Jared Kushner. He received over $2 billion from the Saudi government. His daughter received over $600 million from China and trademarks. You're running against this stuff, yet you're telling me you would still support and vote for Donald Trump. That's what's confusing.
Over Joe Biden? Over Joe Biden? Absolutely.
Who made money in Joe Biden's administration from corruption? And where's the evidence of that? Because we have evidence of Jared Kushner. Well, I mean, laughing is not answering the question. I'm respectfully asking you, where is your evidence that Joe Biden and those in his administration, because Jared Kushner, right, and Ivanka Trump worked in Donald Trump's administration. Where is your evidence that Joe Biden is a criminal and he and many others in his family, in his administration, made money off of foreign entities? Where's the evidence?
Well, I'm pretty sure the evidence is on Hunter Biden's laptop. You know,
what do you mean?
There's also the whistleblowers that have come forward talking about Ukraine.
Have you seen Hunter Biden's laptop?
Talking about the Chinese paying Hunter Biden.
You can't just assume that you can't just assume that there's stuff on Hunter Biden's laptop. You've never seen his laptop. You don't know it. Why would you make a statement like that? You're just throwing stuff at a wall, my man. With all due respect.
No, I'm not. But that's fine.
You know what's in Hunter Biden's laptop? I didn't know they showed
enough evidence. I've seen enough evidence of corruption from the Biden family and from Hunter Biden to know what's actually going on.
Then regardless
of what people like you think, I really don't care. I know what I know, dude.
Okay, well, you could say you know what you know. I'm trying to pick your brain and trying to get actual evidence for you to make these types of claims. You're running for office.
Okay, so then how about we talk about the fact that Joe Biden leveraged $1 billion against a Ukrainian attorney?
That's not true. Okay, let me give you
when he said on live television, when he said on live television that he said unless the prosecutor is fired, they're not getting the money.
Sure. Let me answer that. Let me answer that and try to explain that to you. And if you watch Newsmax and OAN, you won't get this information. But the bottom line is the reason
you watch CNN too, don't you?
So you think Newsmax is more credible than CNN? Has CNN?
No, they're both. No, they're two wings of the same bird, bro.
Really? Has CNN been sued for $800 million in a lawsuit with Dominion voting machines?
No, but two of their producers. But two of their producers were recently just indicted on child porn and child trafficking charges.
Okay. And are they still employed?
Well, and didn't Don Lemon and have a sex scandal? Oh, and Chris Cuomo, wasn't he feeding information to his brother about the women that were coming forward as whistleblowers? Oh yeah, and when they actually let him go, when CNN let him go, CNN said that Chris Cuomo, their number one anchor for a while, was a liar and couldn't be trusted. So, dude, look, bro, the fact of the matter is both sides of the Mockingbird Media are corrupt. I call them Mockingbird Media because of Operation Mockingbird, when the CIA infiltrated major media outlets in the United States in the 60s and the 70s to control the anti-war and civil rights movement narratives. And it's only gotten worse ever since then. And yes, Newsmax and Fox News are a part of that Mockingbird Media. Okay, just like CNN, MSNBC, ABC, they're part of the Mockingbird Media. It is the same thing as state-run media out of USSR, out of Nazi Germany.
Let me ask you a question.
It's the same thing.
You mentioned Hunter Biden's laptop. If they're a part of the Mockingbird Media, can you please tell me where you got your information on Hunter Biden's laptop?
Dude, there's websites all over the place.
Which website did you get that information from?
Where it has all of this information laid
Where?
out for people.
Which outlet
I
did
can't
you
remember
get
the name of the website off the top of my head.
Okay, well, that's kind of important when you make a claim that the president's son, you know what's in his laptop, and you're claiming he's with underage
I've
girls.
seen enough to know.
Okay,
and
but
let me ask you this. Let me ask you this. How do you feel about the fact that Joe Biden's own daughter said that she was so weirded out about the fact that her father was wanting to shower with her that she was afraid to shower and waited for him to go to bed? How do you feel about that?
Sure. Here's what I feel about that. She wrote a book. She made money off a book. Here's the bottom line. And now I'm going to give you some facts, Jake, not conspiracy theories. Joe Biden has never been convicted of a crime. He's never been indicted of a crime. You can laugh. Donald Trump is a liable.
I know he hasn't been indicted or convicted. I'm well aware of that.
I let you talk. Let me finish. Donald Trump has been proven a liable rapist in a courtroom. I've never heard you talk about Donald Trump. He also has had 25 women, and you probably didn't know this, including his ex-wife in court documents that accused him of rape. But people like you want to talk about Joe Biden sniffing a girl or a book that his daughter wrote about showering with her dad. Why is it again, and I've asked you this question before, when it comes to Donald Trump, you seem to wear the Donald Trump knee pads, but when it comes to Joe Biden, oh, let's talk about Joe Biden's daughter's book. Why is that, Jake?
Well, you see, Donald Trump and I don't agree on everything. There's a number of things that Donald Trump has said and done that I don't agree with. So this notion of wearing the Donald Trump knee pads, as you say, is unfounded.
Well, here's because hold on. To be fair, and then I'll let you finish, Jake. To be fair, this is why I say that. You claim that Donald Trump won the 2020 election, which he didn't. You say Donald Trump did not have any responsibility or bearing on January 6th when you know if he didn't say the election was stolen, which is a lie, January 6th doesn't happen. You don't talk about Jared Kushner and the $2 billion he got from the Saudis. You don't criticize his administration. You don't criticize his daughter. When I call him a liable rapist, you want to talk about some book that Joe Biden wrote. That's why I say you wear the, with all due respect, the Donald Trump knee pads, because I don't hear you criticizing him on Newsmax or whatever other right-wing entity. And then when you want to talk about Hunter Biden's laptop and you want to talk about the Mockingbird Media and you want to attack members of the media, when I ask you for your source, that you seem to know everything that's in Hunter Biden's laptop, because I wasn't aware that the DOJ showed evidence to felons, with all due respect. You can't give me the entity where you got that information from, but you want to make complete generalizations about the media, the Mockingbird Media. Yet when you make a claim, you don't source it with literally anything. That's why I say you wear the Donald Trump knee pads.
Okay. So all these media anonymous sources are sources now, huh? Well, look, dude, I am simply telling you what my opinion is. Understood. And the reason why I have the opinions that I have. I don't like Jared Kushner. I'm just gonna be honest with you. I don't like him.
We agree.
And I think it was a mistake, in all honesty, for that appointment to be made by Donald Trump. I understand to a certain extent wanting to have family members or people that you know and that you think you can trust in your cabinet, considering all the backstabbing that went on with Donald Trump. Right. I understand. Now, when it comes to criticizing Trump, there's a lot more that he has done that I agree with, and I would do if I were in his shoes, than the other way around.
Do you think he was a good policymaker?
But Operation Warp Speed, you know, things like the blowing up of a Native American burial site at the
Operation Warp
Speed to create a border wall.
Jake, let's try to go one at a time. Operation Warp Speed. I agree with you. I give him credit for that. Yet he took the vaccines in private, and then when the Mockingbird Media on the right tried to downplay the vaccines, and by the way, you're pretty anti-vaccine yourself. Weren't you discharged because you refused to take a vaccine, but yet you want to give Donald Trump credit for the vaccines? And then you want to talk about—
No, I just said that I don't like what he did. Are you listening to me?
Okay, so you don't like Operation Warp Speed. You think the vaccines were bad.
Well, I think that pushing something without real, like, efficacy or human trials is really a bad idea. Yeah. And I don't care what your reasoning is. I mean, the fact of the matter is hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, and Regeneron actually did a really good job of taking care of whatever COVID infections there were. But the thing is, those are cheap and effective solutions. And the only way that Operation Warp Speed could be pushed through this
Yeah.
emergency authorization is if entities within the government, the bureaucracy, the deep state, is if they were able to say that there was no other viable solution other than a vaccine. And when we look into the fact that some of these patents, dude, like they've been around for a while. Okay. And there was a Chinese doctor over in China that was working on the COVID stuff in in October of 2019.
So, Jake, this is where we will agree. This is if
trusting Fauci was a really bad idea.
Well, here's where I will agree with you. I believe we do have a cure for cancer and diabetes, and I believe the pharmaceutical companies are the reasons why we don't right now. So we agree there. With that being said, I don't go as far as to say the vaccines were all bad. In fact, they saved a lot of lives. I almost died of COVID. Does that mean the vaccines are perfect? No vaccine is perfect, right? But at the same time, I completely, agree with you that, listen, the pharmaceuticals make a lot of money. There's absolutely no question about that.
Yeah, and it's atrocious. They're standing in the way of very real cures that could very well change people's lives and help people to no longer be sick, that could actually cure cancer or cure diabetes and stuff like that. But they don't want those things to be released to the public.
I don't disagree. I just think that there's a way to say that without saying that, that all vaccines are bad. But at the same time,
well, I never said all vaccines are bad.
I didn't say you said that, but there are people out there that have said that. I don't think anybody should be forced to get a vaccine. I don't think there ever should have been vaccine mandates. So we probably agree on that. In closing, because I could talk to you forever, and I appreciate the conversation. You are running for Congress. You're out in Arizona. I agree with some of your policies or what you want to implement. My only point that I've said in this entire interview is that if we can get away from, and listen, you're entitled to your opinions. I'm just giving you my opinion. If candidates could get away from Trump won the election in 2020, which he didn't, and get away from everybody's a pedophile, then I'm going to take people like you a lot more seriously, and people like you that I could see myself voting for. I don't think January 6th was an inside job. I don't think September 11th was an inside job. I can tell you with full certainty, October 1, there was one shooter, and that shooter is now dead. I think if you can focus, and this, again, just my opinion, you're entitled to yours. That's why I wanted you to come on. If you could focus on the issues that you want to change in Washington, D.C., I think that would suit you better. That's just my opinion.
That's what I thought this interview was about, but you chose to, derail it because I tried to tell you the reasons why I went to DC. Regardless of what those things are or what my beliefs are, my campaign platform is sound, and it will dismantle the corruption in DC for generations to come. So regardless of what our petty differences regarding opinions of this or that, I think that if we can agree on the four things that I'm proposing when I'm running, now that I'm running for Congress, or things like cures need to be released to the public that are being held by the pharmaceutical companies and the bureaucracy, the deep state. If we can agree on those things, then it really doesn't matter about all this other stuff, because we can agree on the systematic corruption and how to solve it. And that, my friend, is the very thing that the establishment does not want, that the uniparty does not want. They don't want independents like yourself or libertarians like myself coming forward and uniting the country and getting rid of the two-party uniparty system.
Right. Well, in closing, I'll say this, and I'm going to be honest. I'm always honest. I believe you're being honest as well. Those four things that you're running on your platform, I'm with you 150% on. That's the truth. I would love for you to come back. I certainly don't try to derail any interviews, but I want to get deep dive into your way of thinking with some things that we disagree on. So that was certainly not my objective to derail anything. And I would certainly welcome you to come back, and we could have another good conversation if you're willing to do so, Jake.
I will enter any home where I am welcome, just like Jesus.
I appreciate, we didn't even get into religion and any other stuff. Next time, Jake, I want to get into those topics with you, but I do appreciate your time. I appreciate you coming on. Good, lively conversation, and look forward to having you on again soon, Jake. Appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Send me the link. I'll put it on my Twitter.
I appreciate my X. Good conversation. And I will do that. I will do that today. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, that is Jake Chansley. He is running for office as a libertarian in the 8th Congressional District in Arizona. Boy, we talked about a number of topics. We covered a lot, ladies and gentlemen, but I appreciate the conversation. I disagree with him on what I would characterize as some conspiracy theories,